check out Cajun Lights, your complete dog hunting outfitter. Tracking equipment, leashes, collars, dog supplies, and much, much more. You can find it all at CajunLights.com. And don't forget their outstanding lineup of lights. You can find it all at CajunLights.com. Elite nutrition products are the hottest thing on the market right now for dog and horse owners. And Houndsman XP is a dealer. You can find all their products on our website at houndsmanxp.com. Over the past 5 years, you've tuned into this podcast, and I don't take it lightly. We have built a mutual trust. And when I recommend a product, it's because I believe in it, I use it, and I'm given my seal of approval for that. I'm putting my name on that. And with Elite Nutrition products, I do trust it. I do use it. I've seen great results with their essential dogs, their pre and probiotics, their tick-borne disease treatment. It's all natural. It's a great alternative to pharmaceuticals when used appropriately. If you expect extreme performance, you need Elite Nutrition. Available from houndsmanxp.com.
I had him up one time, had him up flying, and he was raking off to the south, and he was probably, almost a mile away from me, up probably 800, 900 feet. And so I saw him slowly coming back. Okay, he's going to come back. I'm going to be able to get on these ducks. And then all of a sudden, he drops to the deck. I'm like, what are you doing out in the middle of this field? And I was like, oh, man. You just, everything getting, all of a sudden it changes. And so I'm fine. I'll go tracking him, trying to figure out what's going on. And he's caught a cormorant.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast, and we are continuing on in Oklahoma. And this episode is with Rob Huber. We talk about all kinds of good stuff in this episode, longwinging, Rob's experiences serving on NAFA and other organizations, and lots of other great stuff. Since we are going to be in the same state here for a while, I'm going to try and keep these introductions brief, and as is the case whenever that is the scenario, just jump right in as usual and get right into it. So that being said, here we go. I think personally, Rob needs a little bit better living situation, don't you? I don't think his house and his living situation's nice enough.
Rob's done well. He's been a good friend for a lot of years, and his other house was a little bit larger than this one.
Oh, so this is downsized?
Yeah,
okay.
This is downsized a little bit.
Okay.
This was the house that he was raised in.
Yeah, that's what he was telling me.
This was his dad's house, and last time I heard, his dad was living next door.
Yeah,
stuff. So he's kind of brought it home and downsized a little bit, and he loves it because he does all the stuff he's got around here, and he's having a good time. I think he's slowing down some of his work a little bit to where he and Carolyn are enjoying a little bit more of the retirement. He's kind of probably doing half-day stuff now.
What's retirement?
It's a lot of work. To be honest with you, well, I can't wait to retire. And it's like, well, when you retire, you got a lot of stuff. Like, how did I ever work and do this stuff at the same time? And so you just kind of get into it, and a lot of times your first few months is a little bit slow. Then it starts picking up, and then one day you wake up and realize that, dang, my time's starting to get a little bit shorter here. I better start getting busier and doing more stuff while I can still do it. So, and falconry's that way too. I mean, it's, after so many years, you realize, I probably don't have that many years left. I need to really kind of, decide what I exactly want to do and how I want to do it. And the landscape's always changing. I've been flying an area for the last 20 years. With falcons and ducks, and it's been a great area. And actually was flown before that by a couple other guys. I got windmills coming in this year, and it's just loaded. So I'm done. So I know I've got to find new areas to go fly, and I'm seriously considering going back to goshawks. I flew those for years. Like, I can jump ducks on a pond with a goshawk with a windmill within 3/4 of a mile, not worry about it. But I'm not flying my falcon that close.
Yeah. I don't blame you. And yeah, I mean, it's funny that you said what you said about, retirement and stuff in general, because everybody that I know that's been retired or become retired. They're like, well, I'm busier now than when I was before. And like you said, I mean, heck, even me, like, I turn 42 next week, and with all the changes that have happened in my life this year, I'm sitting there thinking, man, my life probably, especially with the way I go, is probably half over at this point. So I'm already, kind of thinking about, well, do I really want to stay this busy for like ever? But guys like us and guys like Rob, and I mean, I don't really know if we know how to not be busy or have something to do, though.
Right.
And so, I mean, at least you'll have something to do, have your time kind of occupied trying to find new spots, readapt and re-overcoming, your circumstances. Right. I mean, that sucks, man. This whole windmill, I hate all these turbines, like, I don't know how, I mean, I know that it makes somebody money somewhere, which is why we keep getting them. Right. But they're like the least, whatever. Yeah. That's a whole tangent.
That's a whole rabbit hole we can go down.
Well, I guess we probably shouldn't go there.
I would say not.
Yeah, but it's frustrating. We'll just leave it at that. Yeah. But well, I mean, so going back to a goshawk, then, or a North American, Finnish.
Well, let me introduce myself a little bit.
Yeah, go for it.
Robert Huber. I've been a falconer since 1969. That's when I started. Way back before there was regulations, and flown, red tails is typical most people, but red tails, Cooper's hawks, Harris hawks, flew goshawks for about 20 years, North American, and coming out of Wyoming. The guys Joe Catahenry and Tim Neese, good friends of mine from back in the late 80s and early 90s. We did a lot of hiking in the mountains, which was a lot of fun and experience that if somebody's not had the opportunity to do that, needs to. It's phenomenal.
Totally agree.
To get out there and just hike the mountains and go, oh my gosh, look at this, and all of a sudden hear that cat coming at you. And
not to cut you off real quick, though, the sad part about that whole area, though, I mean, it's all chopped down now. Pine borer, and then the pine borer beetles and all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah, I'm talking to those guys. This is nothing like that we used to be. So, no. And the goshawks moved. They're someplace else.
Sure,
they're still there. They've just gone someplace else. But it was that lodgepole pine forest was very unique for them, and it was easy for it wasn't easy, but there was a system to locating the birds. And after I got done with that, I started flying falcons, and I've flown falcons probably for 20 years now. 15 to 20 years. And because of the windmill situation we're talking about, I'm looking to get out of it. I'm thinking about it seriously. And I fly red tails off and on. I've got one right now that I'm interviewing because of the NAFA meet this year. I didn't want to trap one and be pressured to try to get it ready going for the NAFA meet. So, I'm just going to keep this bird through the molt. And I trap them, fly them, turn them loose. It's like, they're red tails. I'm not going to worry about it. So we'll see how this one goes, and I'll cut her loose, or him. He's a large him or small her, in this next spring, and think about something else. So.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, and as far as the red tail goes, I mean, I kind of prefer the tweeners myself. I don't really like, a super large female or, a small. I mean, I like those kind of in betweens where you don't really know if it's a he or a she. I think those birds are some of the best falconry birds, especially, as far as diversity goes.
Right. But, my typical preference for a red tail has been around that 44-ounce bird.
Yeah.
This one, she's right at 40 to 40 and a half ounces. So it's like, okay, it could be a very large male or it could be somewhat of a smaller female. Great rabbit catcher. Yeah, sweetheart of a bird, is what I call her, Serenity. But she doesn't like squirrels. I got to get her turned on to squirrels because that's really what we have a lot. I'm from Stillwater, and our rabbit population has been up and down. In the last couple of years, it's coming up and being good. But on the off years, squirrels it. And she could do it if she just figure out that, I want to catch it. So
squirrel hawk is more fun anyway.
Yeah, I've never done it. And it's one of those things, if you have a bucket list in falconry, that's one of my bucket lists is to get a bird to hawk squirrels.
Yeah, and I was just talking about this with a guy the other day, and it's really funny. And I think it was oh man, I can't remember who it was exactly. It was one of the more recent recordings that I just did, but regardless, neither here nor there. I was talking about the same exact thing. It's funny how, someone like yourself, squirrel hawking is like a bucket list thing, right? Because you've never done it. It's not something that, but like, it's funny how someone's bucket list is another person's norm.
Right.
And,
correct.
And, like I think that, flying long wings and stuff is kind of, a bigger long wing consistently on different types of game is kind of a bucket list for me. And that's what you've kind of been doing for the last, 20 years, right? Yeah. So that's interesting to me that, it doesn't matter which part of the world you're in. There's always at least someone that wishes they could have what you have on the norm, and vice versa.
Correct. And the guys in Kentucky and Alabama, squirrel hawking's it. That's it. Now for us, we don't have gray squirrels on this part of it. They're all fox squirrels. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a little bit of a different challenge.
A little bit, yeah.
And
sure.
and so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, and people asked about it. And I said, flying falcons, it's fun. Training them, exercising them, hunting with them. It's all cool stuff because you're watching the falcon go up 1,000 feet and come down with a drone. But you spend hours training a falcon for a 20-minute flight.
Yeah.
You take a red-tail or goshawk and you spend 30 minutes a day flying it and exercising it for 2 or 4 hours in the field.
Yep.
And that's the difference. Mm-hmm. And so it's while you're both connected to the birds, it's a different type of connection. And the falcons is more of an individual type thing. You can go out with guys, but you're flying your bird, and another guy flies his bird. And with the Austringer or the ground quarry, you can have multiple people out there doing stuff at the same time. So it's a different style of falconry, and it's interesting. A lot of people, you'll notice as they go through their falconry career, will start out like Austringers, and that's for dirt hawkers, for those that don't know that old term. They start out that way. They migrate to the falcons, and then in their later years they go back to ground hawking. One, it's more exercise. And you've got that connection. It's a little bit easier to deal. You don't have to put so much time into it. So it's an interesting evolution of time. And Bill McBride, the old guy from back east that passed away several years ago, did a lot of falconry, but he ended up flying red tails for the same reason. So,
yeah, I agree 100% with what you're saying, and to the tune of, you basically, once again, I've heard the same comments made by so many other people. It's funny how you start off with what I call old reliable. You start off with that old reliable red tail, and then eventually you end up back with old reliable red tail.
Right.
Just because it's, everybody makes kind of the mistake, or the it's the same kind of deal with Harris hawks too. Like, everybody talks about kind of going back to what's more convenient or what's more easy or whatever, but people kind of mistakenly use that verbiage sometimes, or that particular language, when in reality, like Jeff Fincher, for example, is the prime example. He always laughs when people talk about how, red tails, they're easy, or whatever, this, that, and the other. But everybody's so quick to forget that every bird has its own quirks and is different, and you got to do different stuff for different things. And
right. And you still have to be a falconer to train a red tail.
Sure.
And a red tail is not, while it's easy, relatively, mm-hmm. you need to know what you're doing to actually get the most out of that bird that you can get.
Sure.
And one of the things that I tell a lot of people, and I put this in the article for our Bob Glass's book that I did for him on hoods and hooding, red tail is the most perfect way for a young falconer to learn how to properly hood a bird. You have an opportunity. You got a bird. If you ruin it, so what? You're going to fly it, and you turn it loose, and you try it again. But you start learning that technique. My red tail, because of the way I do it, they hood beautifully.
And so we'll describe that real quick.
Yeah. Typically, I use the fear. When you first trap a red tail, of course, I put her head on it, run it, bring it home, and get it all dressed up and equipment on it. And typically that day, I will start doing some hood training. I will start popping the hood off, because the bird has fear at that point of you, and it's greater fear of you than it is of the hood. So the hood becomes an advantage because it covers, all of a sudden you pull it off and it's afraid of you. Now you put the hood back on. You don't close the braces, but you slip the hood back on. That fear immediately goes away. So you're using that fear to help that bird adjust to that. Oh, I like this because, it's going on. And I never close the braces at first. I'm just off and on, just sitting down, trying to stay calm. And then when I see she really starts to like, okay, I'm, getting more comfortable in my surroundings. Yeah, you're there, but I'm looking at this stuff. I put the hood on, close the brace, and stop. And I'll do that for 2 or 3 days like that. Maybe 2 sessions a day, maybe 3 sessions a day. But then all of a sudden it's just, boom, it's done. The hood's there, it goes on, and the bird is used to it. So that's an advantage where a lot of guys will say, well, you need to cut the weight on the bird and then get it calmed and then start. Well, by that time you've lost an advantage. So that's how I do it. And that's what I described in that book, in that chapter for Bob, was, this is how I do my hooding.
Yeah. Well, and I know for me, most of the red tails I've had, it's been at least a few days before they want to eat anyway, and it's just like, you might as well do something, constructive in the meantime.
Yeah,
so,
correct.
Yeah.
Why let them sit there and just be hooded and just be still?
Yeah, because I've got to be manning to something still,
right, Right. So I take that opportunity to and I'm stroking them with feathers. I'm doing the old style. I'm constantly stroking and touching with feathers around the feet and around the neck and stuff to get them used to that. And it seems to calm them down quite well. Yeah, my red tail, she didn't eat for 4 days, and Chris Kimball, who you'll talk to later, had a red tail. We trapped one at the same time. It didn't eat for almost 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's just like, what's wrong with this bird,
Mm-hmm.
But it depends. Sometimes they pull fat off quick, and realistically, if you're not feeding them, they're not going to pull the fat off because they go into a survival mode. They'll just sit there. And so some activity helps to an extent. So
sure. Well, and I don't know what you've noticed, but what I've noticed in the ones that I've flown is that typically speaking, the ones that, are nice and fat and definitely quote unquote healthy, whenever you get them. I mean, those are the ones that have been eating well, hunting well and stuff on their own. I'm always leery of keeping the ones that you get that man down super fast, thin, or whatever, super hungry, will hop like the first day, eat readily the first day and stuff. There's a reason why that thing's that hungry whenever you trap it,
Yeah, I would almost to an extent, but I only relay a story. My wife and I, this was 2016, we're out trapping. I wanted to pick up a red tail because we had the NAFA meet in Elk City, Oklahoma. So we're out trapping and not having a lot of success. And I like to trap with pigeons for red tails because I like a red tail that's aggressive enough to go after feathered quarry. And I don't want a mouser. I want something a little bit different. And so we were driving around. Finally, it's time to go home. We drove. Oh, there's a red tail on that pole. So we drive down around, turn around, it's still there. Toss the pigeon out. Pigeon's in the grass. Red tail comes off the pole. I mean, immediately I'm backing up. Here comes the red tail and slams the pigeon in the grass. Takes it off to the side. And I can't see the red tail. So I don't know if it's caught or not or snagged or anything. So I say, okay, we need to go up there and check this out. So we drive up. I grab the towel, walk out, and the red tail is on the pigeon and not a single noose on it. I throw the towel over the bird and bring it in. She weighed 950 grams when I trapped her. I ended up flying that bird at 1,200 grams. And she was the most responsive red tail I have ever had. I mean, she would follow me anywhere. And as soon as I called, she was coming, and she was a killer on rabbits. And so sometimes they say those birds that are in that starvation mode, when you catch them, are very grateful of your effort, and they appreciate the food, and they just kind of keep coming on.
Yeah, and I agree 100% with that. The only caveat that I'll put on that is the ones that I've had that I've tried flying that have been that low and stuff, I agree with everything that you're saying. They are grateful. They are super responsive, or perfect as far as manners and in the field and following and all that kind of stuff. But the catch rates of the ones that I've flown, it sucked. I mean, they for whatever reason, something was going on. I would catch rabbits, but or squirrels or whatever, but the conversion rate, very low percentage, So I mean, that's great that it worked out for you in that situation, that you ended up with the total package, so to speak. But the ones that I've flown, is just, I might as well have just ended up turning them loose and getting a different one, after it fed it back up or whatever. But I mean, that's the reason why sometimes you just got to see it through, because you don't know what you're going to end up with. So,
yep. And you're right. They're all different personalities.
Yeah. Well, and so, pretty much, is there a particular, so you said you prefer to trap with feather. I mean, have you ever really hunted feather actively with a red tail, or is it mainly always just been
no
fur?
It's just, well, one, I have pigeons. I don't have gerbils.
Fair enough.
Yeah. But realistically, I mean, you can trap red tails on gerbils every day, all day long.
Sure. Yeah.
But not every red tail will come to a feathered pigeon. And so I just like the idea that, okay, I've got a bird that's aggressive enough to come after something different. The one I had 2 years ago, and she immediately hit the pigeon and got caught. And I should have kept her. Took her to Amarillo. Hadn't flown her. I just had her like probably 5 weeks before the meet, and I took her to the meet. And first jumped to cottontail, and she like took her head up. I'm like, what was that? I said, okay, that's what we're doing. And you can see the light bulb come in, like, oh, got a jack up. She does the same thing. And I toss her at the jack. She goes and catches it. And the first time off, catches a jackrabbit. I'm going, okay, this is pretty good. So the next day morning, I go out, jump another jackrabbit, and she catches it. First one up. I'm thinking, I got a bird. And she was probably a 44, 45 ounce red tail. And the next day, I think 2 days later, she caught a cottontail there, and that was it. And then caught a couple more, but the rabbits were bad here. And tried some squirrel, but she was interested, but just didn't really quite do it. And so I cut her loose. But she was a good bird. And so you always do that too. You see them and think, I'm going to turn it loose. And I should have kept that bird.
Yeah.
Life goes on.
Well, I mean, but like you said, you kind of got to keep a bird for what you more readily have. And, that's amazing that she was hot after jackrabbits.
Yeah.
Right off the bat. But if you don't have lots of jackrabbits where you normally live, I can understand it defeating the purpose.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. As they always say, you want the bird to fly the core that you have at hand.
Sure.
And so, yeah, if she had turned on to squirrels and I would have probably kept her.
Oh yeah.
But, because she was just so versatile. But that's the challenge of different birds, and it's interesting because a lot of people, I really enjoy training new birds. It's fun having a bird, my peregrine's 8, his imprint, had him for years. So it's just kind of bringing him out, getting him used to things. But you always learn something with a new bird. And that gets to the essence of falconry. When you trap that new bird and you work with that new bird and you see how that bird's reacting to you and what you have to do to get it to back and forth. That's the joy. That's a lot of fun to work with that new bird. It's going to be very frustrating, learning the personalities. But that's kind of why I like to catch them and turn them loose and get something else and go for it.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with also having your summers free and stuff either.
That's kind of the deal I've got with the wife. Is from my wife Julie is from roughly middle of September to end of February. I'm not traveling. I'm flying bird. Now, if I was just flying a goshawk or a red tail, it'd be different because I can have that back going again in 3 days after being home. But with a falcon, if you leave for a week, then you've got to get the bird back up again, get it flying, make sure you got it. And the season's short. It's only 109 days of duck season. And that's really our primary core here in Oklahoma. So when I lose that a week or 2 weeks, I've lost a lot of my season. So, depending on what happens in the future and what I fly in the future, things may change. And I may end up just flying red tails for that very reason. Then I could trap one, fly it for the season, turn it loose, and have the summers free.
Yeah, and a lot of guys I know that do that very thing. And there's, like I said, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
And there's also nothing wrong with keeping a dynamite red tail that you think is worth interviewing long term and stuff either. I mean, I do think though that in your early years, it's important to, even if you've got a really good one, to go ahead and release and get a new one so you can have more experience with multiple birds and stuff. But as the years go on, I mean, I think that's,
Yeah, correct. I mean, especially with apprentices, it's like, and even for up to 5 years, it's like, there's nothing to interview a bird. You just pay attention to it, feed it, and it costs you money to do that. But you gain so much of that knowledge working with those new birds and trapping. At the same time, trapping is not easy. There's an art to trapping and learning and seeing stuff. So,
yeah. And I think it's more important for an apprentice to get that experience than it is to worry about having a dynamite bird, early on.
Right.
Unless you just got a really nice sponsor that's willing to go ahead and just, you can go ahead and just transfer me the bird. I'll hold on to it for you while you go ahead and fly another one and stuff, just in case,
Yeah. No, I've heard of some stories like that. That's a really nice bird. I'll take it.
Yeah. You really need the experience, so I'll just go ahead and hold on to this one for you. Yeah. So, at any rate, well, I mean, it sounds like your experiences and kind of your views on things are pretty similar to myself and a lot of other guys that I know, and that there's really no substitute for ending up with a great bird, but there's even less substitute for experience, I think.
Right.
So, but well, and so let's go back to your early days, and you introduced yourself at the very beginning just a little bit or whatever, but I expound a little bit more on how you discovered all of this and kind of what made you get into it in the first place.
Yeah, everybody has their own
origin story.
Yeah. I grew up in this, in the 60s, where Wild Kingdom was a huge daily program or weekly program. And I was into animals and I was watching that all the time. And Marlin Perkins, and had a lot of stuff with prairie falcons and peregrines. Oh, that's really cool, as a young man would. And I was in New Mexico with the family at the time. I think I was 12. And telling my brother who's older, and he said, I've got a friend at high school that's got birds. And he came over, and I was looking at it, and I was really interested. And my dad, in his wisdom, thought, I'm going to buy him a falconry book for his birthday. So he bought me a manual of falconry Woodford, thinking that would discourage his boy from the sport. And the kick to it is had the book and I was proud of it. And, the next year when we were living in Oklahoma, I was visited by a family, and one of my cousins, I was telling him, I'm going to be a falconer and this and that. And I've got this book. And he said, oh yeah, cool. Yeah. Have you read the book? No. So why don't you read the book? Oh, that's a good idea. So I read the book and was just engrossed at that point in time. And consequently started looking, and picking up the Charles Bradford books that were out in the market at that time. And started saying, I've got to find somebody to help me, and contacted the Tulsa Zoo and got in touch with a lady whose husband was a falconer, and Hirsch Talley, and hooked up with Hirsch. This was probably in 68. I was 13 at the time, and he ended up being my mentor. We didn't have apprentices back then because there weren't any regulations. And he apprenticed me, helped me get my first red tail, kind of showed me some stuff. And that was the beginning of the road. And it's never changed. It's just always been something I've done. And Hirsch ended up being a mentor and moved to a friend, ended up being a brother. We kept it together for years, and unfortunately he passed away 2 years ago at 84. So, his legacy lives on with me. But yeah, that's the start. And, I think I at that time he knew Ken, because at that time there weren't that many falconers in Oklahoma. There was Ken Riddle was one, Mike Brewer was one, Hirsch was a falconer. There were probably a couple others, but they're not the numbers we have today. And I met Ken through Hirsch back in '69. He was still in vet school at Stillwater, and somehow Hirsch ended up with a Harris Hawk that Ken had. I think Ken got it. I remember I got it for his wife at the time. She didn't fly it. It was an immature Harris Hawk, Arizona bird. Hirsch had it, wasn't doing anything, so I thought, let me fly that bird, So I got to fly in 1972. I'm flying, this terrestrial Arizona Harris Hawk. And I think I ended up catching, within a couple of months, with the help of Mark Waller and some other guys, about 20 rabbits with that bird. He was just phenomenal. He was one of those type of Harris Hawks that just, you walk through the field and all of a sudden the bird's off your fist and catches a rabbit at your foot, because you saw the ear twitch. Unfortunately, that bird got attacked by dogs out at Hirsch's house, and we had to put it down. But, so that was kind of the beginning of my falconry career. And I was thinking about it coming in here today. I've been married for 48 years, and, Rob and Carol have been married a long time, but falconry is a tough sport on life. Because it's one of those, while it's a sport, it's a passion that grabs people, and all of a sudden it becomes the focus of your life. And my best advice to people is don't forget family. There's a way to balance your falconry and your family and your work and have everything work out. So, I've seen people have that problem, and it's just like, guys, you got to wake up. I mean, you got to love the sport. You got to love what it does, but it can also destroy a lot of stuff if you let it. I hate to say it, but it's kind of like alcoholism. People, if you ever noticed,
or worse,
if you ever notice a person that's coming off of an addiction, that has had an addiction, they typically are very focused at things that they do, and very concentrated, because it helps them deal with that. Falconry kind of puts you in that realm to where, I'm still collecting falconry, but why am I collecting falconry books? I got more than I need to do, but I still collect them. And then I get new books. I think, what am I going to do with these books? My kids don't want them, but I still buy them.
I'll take them when you're gone.
I love the archives. I love the archives book auction.
Yeah.
Like, oh, nope. Oh, what's that one? I don't have that one. I don't need it, but I don't have that one.
It's literally the worst of two worlds, because it feeds into that OCD, that, like you said, the addictive personality aspect of both worlds, and like that collective hoarding and stuff. I've allowed myself to have two collecting hobbies anymore, and that's falconry hoods and falconry books.
Right.
I had to cut everything else out because I actually got myself into some borderline financial trouble, collecting, vintage toys and comics and stuff back in the day and everything else. And I had to really have one of those come to Jesus moments. So I feel you.
Yeah. I don't collect hoods because I make hoods.
Yeah.
And it's like that, every once in a while, if I'm at the NAFA meet, vending, I see somebody that's got some nice hoods, or somebody that's from overseas. I say, hey, do you want to trade a hood? Grins? Okay. Yeah. So I'll do that, Paul Domsky's back into making some hoods this summer. And I contact him and say, hey, you want to trade? I don't have one of Paul's hoods because I used to have it on the, sure. So he'll contact me. We'll make something up and trade some hoods back and forth. But I've been doing that hood making for a little over 20 years now. It's fun, it pays for my falconry. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Yeah. I'm talked ad nauseum with different hood makers about the, the perils of that as well. And the burnout is real aspect of things and stuff. But
it does happen. It more so when I was working, because I had an 8 to 5 job, plus I had these hoods to make. Well, now I'm retired. It's just like, I'm going to work on this hood in the morning, and I'm going to do something else. So it's not as much as the burnout situation. But here pretty quick, I'll start cranking out hoods for the NAFA meet, because I'm a vendor there, and so I'll take my supply. But it's fun. It's relaxing, and I tell people, as soon as it becomes work, two things happen: either I quit or the price goes up. It's to slow things down, But
yeah, you see that happen a lot too. I've seen that happen with a few other guys as well, and I encourage it. I mean, look, it's a tedious venture, and if you make a good hood or a good anything, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be compensated for that. And if you jack the prices of things up and people are still willing to pay for it because the quality's there and everything else, then you know what, all the power to you in my point of view.
I just try to build a real nice quality 3-piece field Dutch hood at a reasonable price. And that's like I said, it helps pay for my falconry, covers the cost of quail, covers the cost of my books and other stuff that I do.
The other addictions.
Yep.
Yeah, the cost of the heroin, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I feel you. Well, and so how many, and remind me again, how many collective years now have you been hood making?
25 years. Really got into it probably more so the last 10 to 15, Well,
and I'm sure that I'll ask the same couple of questions with like Chris, and I've whenever I talk to him, and I know I ask these same couple of questions to each of the hood makers that I've had these conversations with. But one thing I'm always curious about when I talk to hood makers, especially, is how many hoods did you feel like you had to make before you felt like you were able to comfortably sell one for some kind of compensation anyway?
Right. A lot of it, let me go back up a little bit. I'll answer your question, but a lot of people wonder how you get into hood making, and it's different today for some new falconer like Chris has come into it. I started out in a time when you had to make your own equipment. My first hoods I made were the Anglo hoods. And you had to make your falconers back. So you didn't buy stuff. The only thing you really bought were bells and swivels. And so when I was thinking about getting my first falcon, I can make these hoods, so I built them. Ordered a set of blocks or one block and started making some hoods. It probably took me at least 50 hoods to get comfortable. And every time I built a hood, I'd do something, and a friend would say, "Oh, geez, you're not going to do it this way?" Well, okay. So I'd think about it, so I'd modify something. I sent, after, probably the 50th hood, I sent a hood to a friend of mine back in Illinois, Gary Barnes. It was for a little Merlin. And he looked at it and said, "Man, you need to make those corners tighter." Oh, okay. So I figured out a way to make the corners tighter. So you just constantly are modifying your style based on comments, and you finally get to the point where there's my hood. I'm done with it. I mean, every hood I make now is pretty much exactly the same. I've gone through like 4 different block sets. Started out with the Ron Rowlands block, the original Ron Rowlands block, went to New Millennium blocks. Personally, just had some issues with how those hoods fit, and I'm not saying they're good or bad. I just didn't like the way they went on. Heard about Steve Tate's beaked blocks, started talking to him, ordered a set of those blocks, and as far as I'm concerned, they're some of the best blocks out there. And then I purchased from Steve his new Omega blocks, which were an accordion style back block. And I'm in the process now of modifying the pattern to make a 3-piece Dutch accordion that I'm pleased with to fit that block. Because that block's just a little bit different, and they fit differently. So I'm kind of working through that. And that's what I'm using my red tail is he's wearing an accordion. And so I've got it down, so I'm working with another guy to build some patterns for me and test them back and forth. But yeah, it's 50, at least 50 hoods. The people ask me, say, "Hey, I'll show you how to make a Dutch hood." I said, "Well, if you're willing to make 50 and throw them away, come on down." And I think Chris will tell you the same thing, and Chris is really quite accomplished, but he was also, in my opinion, started out making a lot of his own equipment. And he's always thinking, he's one of those guys that's always, how can I make this better? What can I improve here? So it's kind of his natural personality to be like that. So he fits right into that. But I'll let you ask him that question when he gets there.
Well, and it's funny that you specifically use the number 50, because that's almost to a T what most of the other hood makers have said too. And there's, I think, maybe one or two that may have thrown out maybe even a slightly higher number, but on average, it seems like there's something magical about that number 50.
Well, one, I think it's an easy number to come up with. Whether it was 30 or 60 or 70, it's 50. But it brings home a point that it takes practice. And I've gotten to the point now where, and I think most of your accomplished hood makers are the same way. They'll say, it's nothing to make a hood anymore. I know how to do it. I do it. It's almost automatic. But I've given several classes and taught several classes on how to build the Anglo hoods, which are very simple. And going through that process, people go, I'm not going to make these. I'm going to pay somebody. They just, it's like anything you do. Your greatest limitation is your self-expectation. If you talk about kids that are learning how to do artwork and they go, oh, that's terrible, and they throw it away. I said, your self-expectation is going to make you not do that. So don't let your expectation of what it should look like dictate your failure. You can keep moving forward on it. Just because it doesn't look good the first time doesn't mean it's not going to look good the second time. So you keep trying to keep moving forward. And I saved a lot of my very first hoods just like, I made that. That looked like a piece of crap. But I keep it as a reminder, that's the process you go through.
Yeah.
Different stitch styles, different piping styles, I put my piping on differently than a lot of guys put their piping on, but that's just how I do it. And I'm comfortable with it that way.
Sure, and I think that goes for pretty much any form of art, really.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if it's a hood or a painting or a recording. There's been, even from my early days of trying to mix and master music and stuff, I'll listen to some of the recordings that I did, even when I was in audio school or shortly after and stuff, and I'm just like, what the hell was I thinking?
Right.
Same kind of deal. I mean, it's not a bad thing to, if nothing else, just to keep you kind of humble and grounded, to remember what you used.
Right.
To see, there's nothing wrong with appreciating the growth.
Right. Yeah, and I've watched my grandkids start at the piano, and after 5 years, where they've accomplished and what they've done. And a lot of kids, and adults too, they get frustrated. I started playing mandolin 2 or 3 years before I retired. I remember one of the ladies like, a little old to be starting to learn how to play a new instrument. Why? Something unique. And you start out slow and kind of move forward on it. But
yeah, and there's nothing that says that you have to pick something up to automatically aspire to be a professional at it either.
Right.
And so, that's
that expectation. If you look at artwork that Tim Jessel does, or Mark Waller, or any of those guys, and that's your idea, your vision of what a picture should look like, and you try to draw it, and you go, I can't ever do this. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of guys that have that natural ability, but there's a lot of people that are almost there, but they practice and they learn, and that's part of it. That's what I meant when I said, don't let your expectations make you a failure.
Yeah, and there's also plenty of people in the world that are, professionals or really, just amazing at what they do. They didn't start off that way, and they didn't have a lot of the natural ability that some of the quote unquote like virtuosos or whatever. But what they did have was work ethic, and it's very easy for people to not really be able to relate to that or understand that, because all they ever see is the final product. You don't hardly ever see anything up to that point. They always just hear the
right.
They only hear these people whenever they're good.
Right.
They don't hear them, 15 years prior when they're sitting in their room practicing for hours on end or whatever. So,
yep.
Like I said, I'm always very appreciative of the people that continue to try and be better at equipment making and everything else, because I am one of those people that I know that I don't have the time and don't want to dedicate the time to try to learn how to do those things. So I would rather use the convenient, and I think also good excuse of I would love to support other fellow Falconers in their endeavors and keep them motivated.
and I appreciate their support. Let me tell you that. Yeah.
Well, and so have you ever really thought about learning how to do any of the other stuff, as far as, making bells or any other kind of stuff?
I've made gloves. I'm a deer hunter, and I used to have the hide stand, and I make gloves out of deer hide. A lot of work, kind of like you. I'm gonna let somebody else build that for me, because they got the sewing machine. All mine was hand stitched and stuff, and I make my own lures. Excuse me. I make my own lures and that sort of thing still, because it's not that hard to do. It doesn't have to be pretty. The bird doesn't care, as long as it's got a piece of meat on it, and that's what Mike Brewer one time called his red tail. I just put a drumstick on a string and it worked. The birds don't care. So I do that, but I used to, as always, use the make my leashes and jesses, but anymore I've gone all nylon stuff. The quality of that stuff, and it lasts forever. It's just, you can't beat it. Leather's always getting old and breaking. Sure. But other than that, I'm a woodworker. In my retirement, I've got a shop and do that type of stuff and build tables and furniture. So it's, I keep myself busy, except now it's getting kind of hot down in the shop. I don't spend too much time down there.
Well, in your retirement, you should be able to afford a nice swanky wood shop setup for yourself and stuff too.
It's pretty swanky.
Right?
My wife Julie keeps saying, "When are you getting an air conditioner?" Well, I'm thinking more and more about getting an air conditioner. And I just recently, last year, put a ceiling in the actual shop part and closed off part of it, so I can actually heat it in the wintertime with my wood stove. But now I'm thinking, maybe I ought to get a little air conditioner to put in there, kind of knock the coolness heat off.
Yeah, just get you a nice little mini split or something to stick in there. Yeah,
do it.
You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Well, cool. And so, before we get too much further too, I do want to touch on one other thing that I like to touch on with people that kind of serve roles and stuff in organizations and have played a part either in their state clubs or even, NAFA and stuff like that, before we get into the next part of the conversation, being story time.
Right.
But you've been involved in NAFA for quite a while, right?
Yes.
And also the state club to some degree as well.
Yep.
Go ahead and talk about some of your experiences with that and kind of what that's entailed for you, because it seems like everybody has similar yet different experiences with the time that they've served in some of these volunteer roles for either, their state or, NAFA, or their organizations and stuff. So,
yeah, I think where to start. I'll start with the NAFA first. The state club and NAFA kind of blend together for me in part of the ways. And in my career, I was a program manager for some state programs, and so working with people and working with processes was not new. And the state club, I remember we were it was in Oklahoma, it was pretty much just a gentleman's club. We got together and we did stuff. And back in the day, and this was probably mid-'80s, we had the prairie chicken. We call it prairie chicken wars. It's when the prairie chicken was in Oklahoma was on decline, and there was back and forth discussions about things. And we were having a big club meeting one evening, and it was our fall meet. And we're having a bit of a row going on, if you want to say that, because Steve Sherrod was big in the prairie chickens. He was a big doer as breeding and protecting. And of course the Falconers were trying to keep the season going. And we were talking about, well, the club needs to do this, club needs to do that. And Steve said, "We don't have a club. We're just a bunch of guys getting together." And I remember sitting there going, "Well, Steve, you're exactly right. let's form a committee and write some bylaws. And that began the formalized Oklahoma Falconers Association. Rob Rainey, myself, Steve Sherrod were on the committee to draft the bylaws. Most of it was Rob and I. We spent a lot of hours back and forth. Rob at that time would stay up late. I would get up early, so he'd send out emails early, late at night. I'd answer them early in the morning, and we'd be back and forth. But we pretty much mirrored like many clubs, mirrored our regulations off NAFA, our bylaws. It was approved, and I had the honor of being the first president of that newly formed club. And that really started my involvement with Oklahoma Falconers. I served as president, vice president, I'm secretary at one time, back and forth, and always been active with the state in the state wildlife department. But in 2009, I was asked to chair the NAFA meet for Woodward. I hadn't really ever, my NAFA meets had been way back in early 80s. Like, okay, I haven't been to NAFA meet in years. So I did it and planned the NAFA meet and identified what I thought was an issue was that it was the planning of a meet was kind of loose. What's whatever the chair wants to do. We've kind of done it this way, whatever the chair. Well, in my world, that's not how you do things. You have some systematic direction. So my big effort after the NAFA meet was to write the NAFA meet guidelines or update the NAFA meet guidelines to be more comprehensive, and did that. Served on Future Meets Committee for a while, and I ran I think against Greg Thomas as for director at large, and Greg won that position, and then I think I ran for central director another time and got beat. I ran for central director in 2017 for the 2018, and I won that one. Became central director for NAFA in 2018. Served in that role until December 2024. And I had at that time had the honor also, among other things, to work on the bylaw revisions for NAFA with Rob Rainey. We established the changes or helped draft the changes of the 3-year terms. Came in with the board chair, vice chair to help take some of the pressure off the president. And that was approved, and I was voted in as the first board chair. And I was board chair for 3 years. For NAFA, and my goal is that and it was like, okay, now I'm running the meetings. Sheldon was running the meetings, the president. Now it's the board chair running, the vice chair running the meetings. So it was a kind of a flip flop of what you're doing. And I remember Martin, when we did it, he was like, I don't know about this board chair, because every time there's change rubs you a little bit the wrong way. And Martin wasn't real sure about it. And then all of a sudden, after about the first few months, like, I'm kind of liking this because I don't have to worry about this stuff. I can focus on other things. And that was the goal when we did the bylaw changes, is to allow the president of the NAFA and the vice president and his selected people to drive the ship, make it move forward, react to those things. Let the board and the board chair and vice chair basically run the directors in the meetings and take that pressure off of them. And it worked quite well. And my goal then as the first chairperson was to establish a pattern. I wanted to set an example of how things should be done to begin with, to set that good example for them. And I think I did that. Tyler's the new board chair, and it's kind of follow suit, and he's going to modify things, which is what needs to happen. But that tone was set, and I'm very proud about that, helping out. Right now, I'm on strategic planning. I'm the chairperson for strategic planning for NAFA. Something NAFA did way back when and got off of it. And in order for the organization, any organization, to continue to move forward, it needs to be forward thinking. And often NAFA is reacting. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. APHIS is coming down. NAFA has to react. How do we adjust to that? How do we adjust to this and that? So they're more of a reactionary. There are some progressive things going on. Martin and Heath go to the wildlife conference every year. Those are progressive things in making contacts. But NAFA needs to think a little bit more than that. So I really pushed to have a strategic planning effort. So we created a survey. We basically took the survey from 2009, updated it, modified it, sent it back to the membership, analyzed it, sat down and identified, I think it was roughly 8 to 10 points to help move things forward. And I'm proud to say we're working on it and we're making some progress on it. And I think it's going to help NAFA become a stronger organization in the future. So it's been a pleasure. And I tell people, and I've wrote this several times in my Goshawks director reports, is that being a director for NAFA or being an officer for NAFA has nothing to do with how good of a falconer you are or how well known of a falconer you are. Because at that level, when you're a director, you're managing a club. You're not managing falconry, you're managing a club for falconers. And it's totally different. And the more involved you are, the more enjoyment you're going to have. And I was always the one, I'd roll up my sleeve. What do you need? You want that done? I'll do that. You want that done? I'll do that too. Whatever you need to have done, I'll help you get that finished. And I can, that's very, very rewarding for that perspective. So, for anybody out there that's thought about it, it's been a regular member of NAFA and is passionate about falconry and has those management skills, run. You might not win the first time, but run. It's not a slap to say you're terrible if you lose. That's just the way things happen. But elections are choices. And so if you get beat, try again. Opportunities are there.
Yeah, fair enough. Because there's always got to be somebody that's willing to do it. And if nobody's willing to do it anymore, then things are, they're going to stop happening. So it seems common sense, but there's got to be somebody to step up and do the job after the one person's done doing it. That's just the way things work. So
one of the things is that NAFA is competing with a lot of different stuff today. A lot of falconers will think, well, what's NAFA do for me? We've got the internet that's got all sorts of stuff out there. But NAFA is that central focus point. And, a lot of people won't agree, but falconry is a privilege. It's a license, just like a driver's license, just like a permit to carry license. You get it, you earn it, you obtain it, it can be removed. So it's a privilege, and NAFA is there to help protect that privilege, not only of our ability to practice falconry, but our ability to have access to the birds that we have. And NAFA does that on a national scale. You can have the most active state club you have, and you could have the best contacts with your state people. That's not going to help you affect federal change. Even if 2 or 3 clubs get together, that's not enough. We're seeing that with the peregrine take. The Central Flyway is very much in favor of peregrine take. So is the flyway on the California coast. But it takes a national effort. It takes something like NAFA to pull all that together. How do we attack that? How do we approach that? How do we move forward through that? And that's the only thing we can do that as a national club. And so you're out there practicing falconry today. If you just started in the last 15 years, you're reaping the benefits of people that were dedicated to falconry from the 40s, 50s, and 60s to have the sport that we have today. And if you don't get involved in NAFA, involved in your state club, what you are experiencing so greatly today can very easily be gone. We're right now starting to see a shift in our wildlife coordinators. In the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, they were pretty much all hunting-based wildlife people. My degrees in one of my bachelor's degrees in wildlife management. I was a big hunter. I liked animals, so I got into wildlife management. I didn't pursue that because at that time the jobs weren't there. But what we're having today is we're having people coming in to wildlife that are not so much conservation as they are protectionist. And this is all my opinion in seeing things, but you're seeing a shift in how they approach falconry, how they approach the use of these species. And as that shift happens, we have a great greater chance of losing what we've had for the last 40 years. So it always requires us to safeguard that and move forward on that. And that's some of the stuff that NAFA's been working on, is how do we start promoting that falconry within those units? How do we make their job easier? And my career as a state regulator for 35 years, and I would have people come to me wanting something, and I said, well, if you're not bringing something to the table, I can't help you. So I always learned early, if you bring things on a silver platter, it's better received because I don't have to do any work. They look at the product. And that's kind of what NAFA's starting to do, is put those products together to go out there to those state regulators to say, hey, here is how we promote falconry and how we think this is perceived, to help move things forward.
Yeah, and I think that and once again, that's kind of why there's always, it seems like there can be an improvement made so that, people can understand better how things work within, like, the whole advocacy of an organization to, either our federal or state entities.
Right.
And, the more that people can kind of see what all kind of happens truly behind the scenes and all the work that really does go into maintaining what we have, I think the better off we're going to continue to be. And, I really hope that more people do continue to understand, just all the work and time, effort, and energy that goes into it, because without it, you can make the right versus privilege argument all you want, but the fact of the matter is all you have to do is look at some of these other countries and see what has already happened or hasn't happened yet even.
Correct.
And see what they have to go through.
Right.
And comparatively speaking, we're spoiled, but there's also a reason we're able to stay kind of spoiled.
Correct. Yeah. Mexico is a good example.
It's a great example.
Mexico has great falconry, and there's very dedicated falconry, but it is not a regulated sport. And there have been several attempts by the legislature down there, or whatever you want to call it, to basically make falconry illegal.
It kind of more or less is, in a
right.
way.
Yeah. They're practicing it under the radar. Kind of like we were a little bit in the late 60s, early 70s. But we've always tried to push and help Mexico. Like, you guys need to get a federal regulations on falconry because it protects your falconry. Without that, you have nothing protecting you. And we did Carney last time we did Carney. I don't remember what year it was now. 2022, I think, probably.
It's a couple of years ago. Like that.
We had an international meet, and we had all the people coming from South America and talking about stuff and trying to promote, regulation and protection of the sport. And we got, and it's interesting listening how they deal with it and how they're doing things. And, regulations, we protect birds because a lot of the argument is, there's illegal trade, there's illegal. So, if you regulate it and you require certain things, you start to minimize that wild take or the illegal take, because now, what am I going to do that for? I can get it legally. Just as easy, or if not easier, and so it's there's a reason for that and a good push on it. But yeah, there it goes. United States has some of the best falconry regulations in the world, and it's so easy for us to lose it if we're not careful.
Sure. Yeah, and like I said, there's always going to be hurdles that we're going to have to jump through in some way, shape, or form, or another. And yeah, why it's almost like, why shoot ourselves in the foot, to a degree. It's a lot easier to kind of keep maintaining and or working towards,
right,
what we already have and improving what we have, as opposed to kind of just letting things stagnate. So, and well, eventually, decompose, I guess. Yeah. It's bottom line is there's got to be somebody to serve in these roles and do these jobs and to continue to be willing to put forth the time to advocate and stuff. And that's the only thing that I know that I've noticed that it kind of worries me a little bit about, kind of the future in some ways. Luckily there still continues to be people willing to step up and serve in these roles and do what they can to, keep things going. But I just hope that there's going to continue to be, I guess.
I think there are, and a couple of things you made a comment I want to say. It works because it's a collective effort. It's not one person doing it. It's everybody doing it. And just, people out there, I just don't have the time to do that. You didn't have time to do falconry before you got into falconry either. You made the time to do falconry. You didn't have time to have a baby, but you made time when you had a baby. So, you make time for what you want to do. But being a director, realistically, you meet once every 2 months at a teleconference meeting or a video Zoom call. Your time involved in that might be 5 to 8 hours. As a board chair, my time involved might have been 15 to 20 hours in 2 months. So it's not a huge time killer. Now, as projects come up, as you volunteer to do things, you have an increased effort and time. But that involvement, as I said before, makes you part of the process, and allows you to have the ability to help and direct how things go. And one of the things that we did in the bylaw reviews is we developed a governance committee. And one of the things that committee is supposed to do is have a list of potential individuals that could fill those roles. And they're out there. And each state has people that are floating to the top because they're involved and they want to get active and they want to work and those are the type of people and names that need to go to that list because they're the future of NAFA. And it's constantly changing, and it doesn't matter. There's some of them that are 60, and there's some of them that are 30 or 20. But it's just that personality they have and that involvement level.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter age or whatever. It's are you willing to do it or are you not?
Correct.
And if you're not willing to do it, okay, but you also can't sit and gripe about not liking the way a certain thing is either. Yeah. So that's the way I look at it anyway.
Yeah,
So.
I used to work for guys and they'd come in and complain about something we were doing. I said, "What's the solution?" "What?" I said, "Don't come to me with a complaint and a problem without providing me a solution. It might not be the best solution, but it's a starting point." And one of the things that people forget is I had worked with guys in Oklahoma, okay, don't think one county. Oklahoma's 77 counties. So what I do, I have to think of 77 counties, not just one. And NAFA's the same thing. You might have something that's affecting you individually, but NAFA has to look at it from a national perspective. There might be something going on in Texas, but it's not enough to involve NAFA on a national level. If that makes sense. So you have to understand the perspective of what you're dealing with. Now, NAFA will get involved in things that have a national implication.
Sure. Yeah, and I agree totally. And that I kind of had that debate with a couple of friends of mine whenever a particular state enacted a couple of new changes to their state regulations and stuff. And they're like, well, this is something that, like NAFA should be addressing or whatever. And I'm like, well, technically, no, that's kind of something that state club should be addressing, and kind of trying to tackle first because that's not affecting that particular instance or take or whatever in every state. That's just affecting it in their state,
Correct.
So, it kind of feels to me like that's something that they should try and tackle with their own state situation first. But if it, anyway, regardless, it doesn't matter is state or federal, state club or NAFA. Once again, there's still got to be people that are paying attention to that and monitoring that, so that they can actually try to do something about that. And if those people go away, then you start running into issues.
Right. Yeah, a lot of the state clubs, I can't say that, but I've heard when I was a director in my area that there are issues with state clubs and there are issues with regulations. And it's all about relationships. It's about what type of relationship do you have? Not necessarily just with your falconry coordinator in your state, but the other guys, the other leaders in that state in the wildlife department. So if you've had the opportunity and you've worked to build a relationship with that department, you're going to be a lot better off affecting change. And there's, when you have your fall meets, invite those higher up guys to come out and see falconry in practice. Build that relationship, because that's going to come back 100-fold on you when you need it. Oklahoma, for example, for years we had our squirrel regulation, our squirrel seasons were in statute. It was set in statute, and it wasn't going to change. This is going back to the 30s and 40s. And we talked forever about, hey, we need to get year-round so we can take these things. Finally developed, drafted a law, took it to the wildlife department, and said, hey, we'd like to do this, and what do you guys think? And, oh yeah, we'd love to get that out of statutes. And because it was a constituent request bill, it put them in a better position to help, because they didn't have to spend any of their political coin to get something going. Because when something comes from an agency to the legislature's going, oh, well, wait a minute. But if it's from a constituent, then it's a little bit different deal. But it allowed them to put that together, and it got passed. So we, basically removed the squirrel seasons from statute, put it back in the hands of the department to regulate as an actual conservation and biological reasons, and they gave us year-round squirrel season.
Well, and the point being is there had to be somebody willing to put forth the time, effort, and energy to take it to said people and try and implement the change. Yeah. As you raise your hand across the table.
Yeah, I did. yeah. But but even that it didn't take that long. I mean, we talked about, when you talk about changing statute, it was basically 4 words.
Yeah, well,
drop that out and put it in the regulations. At that time, fortunately, I had neighbors whose dad was a representative, so it was easy for me to find a sponsor. He was willing to take it. He found the other one, and then just kind of took off. And the wildlife department then tied the change to another bill that they wanted to have move forward. And then they felt that would help both of them move, and it did. So they both passed, and that happened because of our relationship. And it also built our relationship, because we, by our efforts, allowed the department to do something they've been wanting to do for a long time, but weren't willing to spend the capital to do it. So we again helped them out in that way. So we continued to build that relationship. And this NAFA meet we're having this time, the cost of everything's going up. Hunting licenses are going up. Land access permits are going up. It's just the nature of the beast. So I was trying to draft some regulation changes that would, kind of allow falconers to have a lower cost. And I was going to put it in the falconry regulation section, because there's some stuff about license fees in there. And sent it to the department and found a sponsor to potentially take it. And they bounced it off the department, and the department said, I don't know that we're really in favor of this. And we said, okay, we're done. No push. We're not about to confront and go against you guys, because you've been such good friends to us. If you're not in favor of what we're wanting to do, we're not going to do it. But that's part of that relationship building. And so the stronger that relationship you have with your state legislators and your state wildlife departments, the better opportunity you can have to regulate things and move things forward.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of the old saying, you can track certain things, bees, whatever, with honey, than as opposed to a lot easier than with vinegar, that kind of thing. But yeah, so, well, and thanks for sharing that. Like I said, I'm always interested in hearing about people's experiences, serving in these roles, and because people need to hear these types of things so they understand that it's not going to be something terrible, and there are good things that come of it. And people need to do it. So,
Right.
I mean, I think it's important for people to hear about other people's experience, serving in these roles and stuff. But to that end, I think it's a good time to get a good story or two from you. Your favorite hunting experience, or a particular fond memory of a bird, or whatever the case is. But
Yeah, they're all fun.
there's always at least one or two that come to the
Yeah,
forefront.
I mean, it's sitting there trying to think. The most joyous time is when I get my falcon gets a double on a duck. Comes out, slams one, misses that, and doesn't see it go down, and go catches it, and I got 2 ducks with one flight, and that's always a thrill. And it's only happened about 3 times, twice with one falcon and one with the other one. But the Doc, the bird I'm flying now, my Peel's peregrine, he had a tendency to all of a sudden decide a couple years ago, I'm just going to fly over here for a while. And it was really getting frustrating when they're trying to figure out what he was doing, what was going on. And I had him up one time, had him up flying, and he was raking off to the south, and he was probably, almost a mile away from me, up probably 800, 900 feet. And so I'm slowly coming back. Okay, he's going to come back. I'm going to be able to get on these ducks. And then all of a sudden he drops to the deck. I'm like, what are you doing out in the middle of this field? And I was like, oh man, you just, everything getting, all of a sudden it changes. And so I fine, I'll go tracking him and trying to figure out what's going on. And he's caught a cormorant, slow flying cormorant. And I'm taking this thing. So he had the cormorant by the head, and I'm like, good grief, bird. And I, carefully, controlled the cormorant, got him transferred off of it, and the cormorant was not hurt. But he was not going to let go of that thing. And he had a couple of scrapes where the cormorant had bit him on the beak and stuff. And then I remember, so that was kind of an interesting story. And I had goshawks that chase deer and try to catch deer. I had Cooper's hawks, trying to wrestle down armadillos and stuff. And there's always that sort of thing. But first falcon I had was a hybrid, and he was chasing ducks, and we're doing great. And I think made multiple stoops at a pond. I couldn't get this widgeon off the pond. And he finally just, coming in like he's just dead tired. And I thought, okay, all right, fine. I'll pick you up or whatever. And as soon as I walked up, that widgeon got off that water. And he took off like a shot. And, I'm sitting there thinking, now I know that's the gyrfalcon in him, going. And it was a tail chase, and he caught that widgeon about a half a mile away. And so I said, that's the last time I'm going to let you tell me, So it's just like, but, it's all fun stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's this, I'm sure I've got more stories going back years, but it's just, some of my best times though in falconry stories is the looking for goshawks in Wyoming with those guys. Getting lost, trying to find your way back and negotiating things. But Joe Catahenry and Tim Neese and Jerry, who just recently passed away, great guys to go out in the field with. And more times we had great times. And we would hunt up in Kansas, chasing jackrabbits with the goshawks and stuff. And we're all getting older, and that life, catching up and slowing us down. I don't think Joe's flying birds anymore. He's paying attention to his grandkids. And I think last time I heard about Tim, he was flying Harris hawks.
Neither of them are really doing a whole lot of flying anymore. They both had, health issues and stuff recently and everything. But yeah, good guys. And yeah, you mentioned Jerry, he just passed and stuff too. And yeah, I mean, none of us are getting younger.
Yeah, no,
that's for sure.
No, but I made the 70 club, so I'm happy. I unfortunately have friends that didn't, so I'm pleased to be a member.
I want to be in whatever club that I can be in and still maintain all of my faculties and everything else. But
well, I'm sure this helps because this kind of keeps you going on different things, and it's and like I said, I know we appreciate this. I mean, you're capturing a lot of American falconry history. That in a blink's gone. And that's, when I saw, when you have a friend pass away, like Jerry or like my mentor Hirsch, you're saddened because they're gone. But then when you sit back and think about all the life experiences and the knowledge that just got blinked away. It's gone. It's never coming back. The voice is not going to be heard again. And so what you're doing is you're capturing a moment of time of a person's life, of what they've done and what they've got, and what their simple thoughts were. And hopefully, at some point, and I think they'll be archived at the archives.
Yeah.
So it's there for other people to listen to and to hear about. And one of the things we're trying to get the archives to do, and I think we'll be successful, is to every journal that comes out, have an article about one of those falconers from the way back when. How many people know about Al Nye? How many people know about Bob Berry? The name, Corny McFadden, but for new falconers, like, who are these guys? Well, that's part of what made NAFA great and what made American falconry great. So let's bring that up. Let's not, let's talk about it. Not just kind of like what you're doing in this, but do it in an article format. So we're pushing to hopefully get those articles from the archives to go in the journal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and anything we can do to continually remind people of where everything kind of came from. And that is one thing that I continually, once again, I don't know if I necessarily worry about it, but it is kind of concerning to see, because once again, I mean, this is going to make me even sound old in my ripe old, almost 42 years of age or whatever, but even just the difference in generations from a couple ago to now, you're seeing a shift in a big shift in what people are kind of valuing. And there's a lot of people now, I think, that, are coming into the sport that don't really understand fully just what a lot of people had to go through to, for them to be able to have. And it all ties back to what we were talking about earlier, but the more people have the resources to see and understand and appreciate how things have evolved, it can't hurt. And I think it's only going to be a benefit. So, I appreciate the sentiment, and I agree with you in that the more we can get, all the resources that we have working together to kind of put all that stuff out more in the forefront, I can only help. So,
yep.
But
all right,
I'm good with about wrapping up. You already gave a good piece of advice earlier. Usually what I end on, but you gave the good advice earlier about how this impacts relationships, and be careful about all that, and yeah. Yeah.
Didn't mean to touch a sore spot, but yeah.
No. It's not a sore spot at all. But it's, once again, that's something that people obviously need to keep hearing, because every falconer at some point in time, I think, lets themselves get a little bit too caught up in whatever moment that they're in, and they will inevitably miss something, or something will happen that they shouldn't have missed, or shouldn't have happened. And we're all guilty of that. I can tell you about 2 or 3 of those right off the top of my head. But
well, I probably have a couple of daughters that are a little bit upset at me because I had grandbabies born during hunting season.
Yeah,
that I didn't get to go see right when they were born because I was hunting.
Yeah.
And I kept telling them, I said, they go, Dad, nope, it's hunting season. I'm not, And I said, you should plan better. However, that didn't go over quite as well as I anticipated.
I bet not. I bet not. But hey, having had a child myself, obviously, there's also not necessarily something wrong with a slightly delayed visit a little bit later in the day or evening too,
Yep.
so you don't have everybody there all at the same time too. So whatever.
Yep.
Anyway, well, I appreciate you so much for taking the time today to come do this, and this has been a lot of fun, and hope the rest of the weekend continues to go well with these, and I'm happy to talk shop with all you folks from Oklahoma, and I appreciate you all having me and stuff.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for being here.